Hey everyone, me Kevin here. Congress is currently reviewing 3 different stimulus proposals. One from Nancy Pelosi and Democrats, one from Mitch McConnell and Republicans, and one from a bipartisan group of senators that offer $908 billion for stimulus. This means in one day, we got word of 3 stimulus packages that are now circulating. In this video, I'm going to try to put all of this madness together and make this as simple as possible. Just remember that you can still get 4 free stocks with Webull. Deposit $100 and get 4 free stocks worth up to $1,600. Somebody did the math on this and said, hey, you should get at least $21, which would be a 21% rate of return on your $100 that you deposit with Webull. Use that link down below to take advantage of that offer. And of course, get life insurance in as little as 5 minutes. You can Apple Pay or Android Pay for it. Okay, let's go ahead and start with a little bit of background about what representatives and congressmen and women are saying today, and then let's jump on over into the details of the new bills that we've got. First, Mitch McConnell today suggested that the only way we can get a stimulus bill done is by attaching it to a government funding bill. The government funding bill, in other words, the omnibus spending package that we expect to be passed by December 11th, will require negotiating all stimulus talks and coming up with a stimulus deal within the next 10 days, probably sooner, to actually be a part of this government funding bill. In other words, we should expect to see a substantial acceleration of stimulus talks over the next week here in order to actually be prepared to vote on an omnibus spending bill by December 11th that includes stimulus proposals or, provisions. This is Mitch McConnell. This, by the way, is the complete opposite of what Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi said just a few weeks ago, when they said, both of them said this individually, we want to do a clean government funding bill and we'll deal with stimulus separately. Well, that has now been turned on its head, and Mitch McConnell is suggesting that we do stimulus provisions along with a government funding bill. Basically, attach the stimulus stuff to the government funding negotiation to finally drive something through. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris this morning reiterated that we need stimulus relief now, saying that whatever is passed now is just a, quote, starting point. And don't worry, because Joe Biden's team will release a much more comprehensive plan when he's in office. Biden called for a robust package of stimulus relief. This comes at the same time as many people are already focusing on the potential of the elimination of the 1031 tax-deferred exchange in real estate in Biden's economic plan for higher earners. Jerome Powell is testifying, or did testify in Congress today, and said that small businesses may be struggling through this winter, and while there is light at the end of the tunnel, we need relief for them immediately, especially as things get more difficult in this cold season. This is echoed by Federal Reserve President Brainard, who said today that more fiscal relief is an urgent priority. Now, at this time, we have 3 stimulus proposals to get relief done by the end of the month, and they all vary in their priorities. The first is from Senator Mitch McConnell. The second is from the bipartisan group, which we talked about this morning. And the third would be from Nancy Pelosi's team. Let's go ahead and talk about what we know one by one on these. So I got a hold of all of the documents related to Mitch McConnell's proposal, and I broke this all down into this flowchart. Let's go ahead and break down what's in Mitch McConnell's plan and then compare them to some of the other plans. Just a quick note, Lauren posted a really cool new video about how we met and the story of sort of how we met. I think it'd be really awesome if you check it out. If you want to know a little bit more, I will link that down below, or type Meet Lauren into YouTube. Okay, let's go ahead and start with Mitch McConnell's package. So Mitch McConnell begins by saying that he's going to claw back the $429 billion and prevent that funding being used by the Fed again. This is already in progress. We know this is coming, and there's an additional $140 billion of unused CARES Act money. That means this bill starts with negative $569 billion. So while we're not 100% sure the size of this bill, just because some details are missing, it appears like this bill is going to be worth somewhere between $600 to $800 billion from Mitch McConnell. Minus the 569 means they're really not adding that much money to this stimulus pot, so to speak. One of the first provisions in Mitch McConnell's outline is, of course, liability relief. We've broken down Mitch McConnell's essential corporate immunity many times on this channel before. Basically, it becomes nearly impossible to actually file a COVID-related lawsuit and expect to win. There was a lot of immunity built into these COVID liability protections by Mitch McConnell's office. There would be a second round of PPP funding if your business's revenues have declined 25%, comparing one quarter in 2019 to another in 2020. you can be eligible for the first round of a PPP loan again if you have less than 10 employees or 10 or fewer employees. So if you have 10, you'd qualify as well. And you would be able to apply for your first round of PPP funding if you have not yet. There will also be some improvements for seasonal employees and the way you can spend money within the PPP program. You'd actually have a choice of spending it over 8 weeks or 24 weeks. You'd be able to opt for that choice. There will be $10 billion in grants going to venues and theaters. Unemployment will be extended, the expiration that we're currently seeing. This is kind of like the kick the can down the road expectations we had for stimulus legislation. And this is exactly what we're seeing here. Basically, the pandemic unemployment assistance will get extended through the end of January. So that way you could still get state unemployment if you're a self-employed worker or gig worker. But there is no boost here. And the same would be true for the PEUC, the Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation System. This is basically the 13-week extension of state benefits that you can get if you are a regular employee and you are unemployed. And this will also get extended through the end of January. A quick note, that date is January 31st, not January 21st. Mitch McConnell's proposal does go on to provide $105 billion for schools, $16 billion for testing, tracing, and surveillance, $500 million for fisheries, $5 billion for childcare and development block grants, basically trying to make it easy for people who work in childcare to go to work, for childcare facilities to have the money to establish and actually open up their childcare facilities again and allow parents to have access to these childcare facilities. $31 billion for vaccine distribution, extending 529 college savings plans so that you could spend money on, or through this plan, on books, educational material, online materials, and as well as spending on homeschooling, which is really interesting because the 529 plan has consistently been expanding over the last few years, even to the point now where you can take money and spend it on private school tuition for elementary school, middle school, and high school if you wanted to. So it's no longer just a college savings plan, and this would extend it even further. $10 billion for the post office, 100% deduction for meals, business meals, $600 to cash donations. So right now, if you take the standard deduction on your taxes, you can spend about $300 in cash. They have to be cash in cash donations and get a tax write-off for that. So unfortunately, you can't. They didn't write it in such a way that you could actually go donate at the Salvation Army and take a benefit for that. You can do that if you itemize your taxes, but if you're taking a standard deduction, you will be able to donate up to $300 in cash and take a write-off for it. And this bill will actually revise that to $600 for 2020. Now, around $600 to $700 billion is really my guess on this proposal. Senator Ron Wyden, a representative in the House of Representatives, said this proposal doesn't even come close to keeping jobless workers in their homes or stopping the economy from further backsliding. In exchange for giving workers a few crumbs, McConnell wants his whole loaf. Now, what's interesting is when Mitch McConnell introduced this proposal earlier today, he said that his proposal is one that Donald Trump would sign based on what Treasury Secretary Mnuchin said. So Mitch McConnell's basically been working with Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, and they reviewed this proposal, and Donald Trump said, yes, I will sign this type of proposal. Now, this proposal does not include an unemployment boost. It also does not include stimulus checks. It is a very, Republicans like to say targeted and others like to say skinny, the skinny bill. Now, the easiest thing to do now, since we do have now 3 stimulus packages, but we do not yet have details on Nancy Pelosi's, let's go ahead and just compare what we know really quickly about Mitch McConnell's bill compared to the bipartisan bill, compared to what Nancy Pelosi is likely to demand. So I've got a comparison section here. On a state and local government aid, Pelosi wants $417 billion. Mitch McConnell is actually giving $0 in his bill to state and local governments, and the bipartisan bill gives $160 billion. On schools, Pelosi wants $224, McConnell $105, the bipartisan group $82. So you can actually see the bipartisan group was smaller on some things and larger on other things. For vaccines and distribution, we've got the bipartisan group at $16 billion, McConnell at $31 billion. The Democrats with the HEROES Act have a substantially larger hope for vaccines and distribution. However, we do not yet have Nancy Pelosi's revised proposal. When Chuck Schumer was asked, what's in your proposal? Since now we have 3 proposals, Chuck Schumer said, that's private. We'll let you know after Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin reviews our proposal. So they are now exchanging 3 different proposals in Congress and trying to figure out where the common ground is. And every time we look at these, it seems like we get further and further apart, unfortunately. At least they're all talking about it now. At least we have 3 sides all focused on stimulus. On childcare, we've got $5 billion from McConnell, $10 billion for the bipartisan group. There's more in the HEROES Act, and we'll see what Pelosi brings out regarding her new bill. Stimulus checks, a double no from the bipartisan group and McConnell. Liability protections, definitely in McConnell's bill. It's unclear in the bipartisan bill. And Pelosi will only go for this with consumer protections and worker protections. Now, quick note on the urgency of this. We only have 8 working days left before December 11th in Congress. It's not very good. All right, on unemployment, the bipartisan bill would provide $300 per week for 18 weeks. McConnell would provide no boost, and we know that Pelosi is a big fan of a $600 per week boost. This is just an outline here of the bipartisan bill itself, but we've kind of already gone through some of the comparisons. The only other thing that McConnell's bill didn't include that is a huge priority, certainly there was no mention of student loans or opioid and that, but one of the big things that is a huge priority, and money for nutrition, but a very big priority is money for tenants, rental assistance. I do want to clarify really quick here that a lot of people do believe that mortgage forbearance is also coming up on expiration. This is not true. Mortgage forbearance is not coming up on expiration yet. You can still apply for mortgage forbearance today. In fact, you can apply for mortgage forbearance for up to 3 months after the emergency declaration, the national emergency declaration ends. And it hasn't ended yet. We're still in the pandemic. So this gives us a little bit of a comparison of these 3 proposals here. What's fascinating about it is that McConnell says we need a presidential signature, and so rather than doing messaging bills, we need to make sure that we get a stimulus package done that we can actually pass. And this is why Mitch McConnell is so gung-ho about actually having a stimulus package that's sort of pre-negotiated with the White House. But the problem with this is Mitch McConnell's proposal leaves out massive things: eviction protections, rental relief, stimulus checks, state and local government funding. It's going to be almost impossible, I think, to get Nancy Pelosi to go from $417 billion for state and local support to 0. This is at the same time, by the way, as Treasury Secretary Mnuchin says he's reviewing Nancy Pelosi's package, and Mitch McConnell says he's reviewing Pelosi's package, and Pelosi says she's reviewing Mitch McConnell's package. Everybody's kind of just reviewing everything right now. It'll be interesting to see what kind of commonality we get between these 3. But I have to say, if Donald Trump approved this Mitch McConnell bill, I'm a little bit surprised that Donald Trump did not advocate for stimulus checks, which is something that he had vehemently fought for before the election, or at least he stated that he did. He multiple times stated he was in support of larger stimulus checks than what even the Democrats want. So it's interesting to me that Donald Trump would sign off on something like this from Mitch McConnell without providing those stimulus checks. Although the election is over now and negotiation, the power balance has changed dramatically. So we'll see how this goes. Obviously, consider subscribing, consider sharing the video to stay tuned for more detailed updates on the facts of what's going on. Appreciate you watching. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.